Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. If you've been in the military a while, you've seen meals ready to eat evolve throughout the years. Their history has evolved longer than you might imagine. Military Times recently visited the U.S. Army Combat Capabilities Development Command Soldier Center in Natick, Massachusetts to bring you this report.
Meals ready to eat. You may know them from the brown plastic bags they've been in for decades, but did you also know that the United States has had field rations since the Revolutionary War? On a trip last year to Natick, Massachusetts, Military Times' Sarah Sicard got to learn the history of American military rations from Lauren Oleksick, the team leader of food engineering at the U.S. Army Natick Soldier Research, Development, and Engineering Center.
In the time of the American Revolution period, we had mostly dried beef, rice, crackers, and we had the spruce beer was an option. However, it wasn't really about feeding troops anything nutritional. It was just keeping them going and performing. So with whatever they could get in a dry form is what they took. And as we advanced toward the Civil War era, it became more about trying to provide fresher meat. So they called it beef on the hoof, where they would actually bring the cattle with them and consume as needed. So nothing much changed during that whole period of time until around World War I, which was the advent of a canned ration. Some of the examples here, you can see we had some breads and some dried compressed cereal. And then as it advanced toward World War II, we introduced what was called the K ration. And that had a little more compressed foods in it. We had a breakfast, lunch, and a dinner menu. It also had canned food. It was pretty much unilaterally disliked by troops. It was really just about, again, providing calories. We weren't thinking as much about nourishment and proper nutrient breakdown. That's also when cigarettes were introduced in the rations. So this was World War I, World War II era. So the canned component would have been like a canned meat. And we also had compressed cereal bars, crackers. I think there was a cheese component, and very dry. They had to use a P38 can opener to open the cans. This is what this looks like here. So they didn't have a lot of variety. This was used to open the cans. So it was a combination of canned food and compressed dried food. And then we evolved after World War II, as we moved into the Korean War era. We had the advent of the C ration. So the C ration was a canned ration. Let's see if I can find the example. Here it is here. That had more cans, a better variety of food, still had the cigarettes in it, but didn't really change for many, many years, from about 1958 till, I would say, even the late 60s. That was pretty much the standard combat ration for troops during that time. Similar products, all mostly canned, thermal sterilized, so very kind of like you would picture regular canned foods to be in terms of texture. Right. Also not very well liked in the field. Again, we weren't thinking so much about acceptability of the foods as opposed to just providing food. Although we did start looking at more of the nutritional breakdown around that time. Really, it was about the advent of the Vietnam era where we really started to introduce new technologies to make foods more nutritional and better quality. So quality really came into play around that time. And that's with the advent of the long-range patrol ration, which was used primarily during the Vietnam War. And these were mostly dried products. So the freeze-drying technology became really big during that time. We were working with NASA. We still work with NASA on space mission food. Right. And so they were really interested in foods that lasted a long time but were very lightweight. And freeze-drying became a very popular food processing technology during that era. So long-range patrol rations included your beef component, but it was freeze-dried. We worked with the astronauts first. So on the Gemini mission and several of the flight missions that were going on at that time all required dry foods. So it was really a technology that was developed primarily for space flight. And then we adapted it to rations and started to replace some of the heavy canned foods with the dry, lightweight foods. Another reason we did that was the shelf life requirement for the long-range patrol ration was very long. It was 5 years. So we had to find a way, even though canned foods might last 5 years, they would degrade over time. And freeze drying was a way to really stabilize foods and ingredients in the rations for a longer period of time. Around this, in the late 60s, early 70s, the packaging really evolved too. And we were able to replace, as we expanded toward the MRE, which I'll tell you about in a minute, we were able to replace the cans with what we call a flexible can. So that had the foil that you would find, like the metal part of the can, was built into the package. So this package here had 3 layers. It had a polyester on the outside, a foil for the barrier to oxygen and moisture that helped give us the shelf life, and then a sealant layer on the inside. And when you pull a vacuum, it would actually prevent any migration of oxygen and moisture, things that break food down. So with the advent of this packaging technology, we were able to move from what was primarily a canned ration into these pouched rations.
Right.
Yep. So then after the long-range patrol was used primarily in Vietnam, that's when we got the requirement to develop the meal ready to eat. And long-range patrol stayed in the system. It's still one of the rations in the system for reconnaissance missions where they go up for a long period of time. They're not going to get resupplied readily, so it's very lightweight, mostly dry. So in order to really enjoy that ration, you had to reconstitute it and be able to, add water back at some point to make it more, you can eat it dry, but it would be more palatable and acceptable to add water. With the meal ready to eat, we wanted something that was ready to eat. You didn't have to reconstitute it. So that's when we got the requirement for the meal ready to eat ration. And in the late 70s, early 80s, these are some of the earliest prototypes you see up here. And this is where nutritional completeness became primarily the most important thing. So we had requirements from the Office of the Surgeon General that said what the nutritional profile has to be. And it was a complete meal. They got 3 a day. So each meal provided the right mix of macro and micronutrients for a warfighter but it was only meant to be consumed on a day-to-day basis. It wasn't meant to carry out for a reconnaissance mission. And that has remained the standard operational ration that we have today. So from the early 80s through today, it is still our primary combat ration